Bruins Beat is brought to you by PrizePicks and the GameTime app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by PrizePicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get up to $50 cash back by playing $5. And we're presented by GameTime. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much, Evan. What's up with you?
Nothing much. It is, I love this time of year. I say it on every podcast I do now, but I love that hockey's just kind of getting going. The captain's practice next week. So we'll be back in person again. And not just Connor's wedding, but quite a bit throughout the winter. And we do have some news, which is nice. Even though it's late August, we do have something pertinent to talk about. And that is Jeremy Swayman, which I think we expected to be talking about. Didn't see it happening, or didn't see him saying, so many interesting things on the Shut Up Mark podcast. Imagine if, Shut Up Evan. I changed the podcast to just Shut Up Evan, or Shut Up Scott.
I actually think that's what every Bruins podcast should be called.
Shut Up Evan, or just whoever the host is. Shut Up Connor, Shut Up Ty, Shut Up Scott. I think that's a great name for a podcast. Just Shut Up host name. But Swayman was on there and gave some interesting quotes that have been circulating quite a bit. I would find it on Twitter, but I think Twitter's down as we record this. At least it was just down for me. Fortunately, though, I have Conor Ryan.
We've finally all been put out of our misery.
Well, remember when, it was like Elon Musk bought Twitter and everyone was like, all right, Twitter's done. They're going to have to pay to use Twitter. And so everybody jumped over to Threads. Meta put out Threads. And I remember, making a Threads account. And honest to God, I have not opened Threads in over a year. I have not touched Threads.
Threads didn't really make it. I remember, I realized I was probably too addicted to Twitter when the first day of rate limits, I think I hit it 9:15 in the morning. And I was like, oh man, I might have a problem.
Wasn't that on free agency day of 2023?
Oh, I think so. I think the actual first day was just before that, but I do remember on free agency day, everyone was sitting in the press box what the hell is this? I can't see anything.
What the hell? I was out. I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, all right, well, I'm done with news for the day. I can't find it. So. But anyway, I have a story open with it. And Swayman said, quote, if you were to ask me that same question a year ago, I would answer truthfully. And I would say, it's scary. It's a lot of resentment towards people that want you to succeed. And when you're not being compensated for your endless efforts and doing what you do best, it's a nerve-wracking feeling because it's your family that you're fighting for. The answer I'm going to give you this year is that I've educated myself and I understand the business side of it all. It's given me a complete new mindset of understanding the business and how to react to it. I understand the cap is going up and where it will be in years. I understand my comparables and how I can't ruin the goalie market for guys that are going to be in my shoes down the line. So certainly interesting coming from him. People like us talk a lot about comparables. People like us dive into sort of where the cap's going to be. I don't think you hear it often from players, or at least saying it openly. Obviously, they're having those conversations behind closed doors. What did you make of the comments, and are you worried?
So I think it just kind of confirms something that we sort of already knew about Simon, which is that he is interested in the business side of it, and he does follow this stuff and pay attention to it. And I felt I think he has been that way for a while, which is kind of why last year I was sort of surprised at how often he kept going back to how much he hated arbitration, because I kind of got the impression he knew what he was getting into. And, remember, technically he's the one who took the Bruins to arbitration.
Yes, Sweeney was quick to note that.
His side was the one who actually filed for it. So I was a little surprised that he played the man. I was surprised by how much crap they talked about me. You know what I mean?
So this would be a fun thing, over coffee. We were gonna just kind of, debate a little bit. Didn't think that, roast me like that. What the hell?
Yeah. So, but I think this kind of confirms that in the year since then, he's probably gotten even more involved and more into all this. And, I think it tells you this isn't going to be a hometown discount type of guy or a just get it done, I'll leave it to my agent type of guy. Like he is involved in the process, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like this is possible, depending on what the deal ends up being, possibly going to be the biggest contract he signs. So like, yeah, he should be involved, and you should want to get the most. So I don't blame him at all for that, but I think it sheds some light on, like Elliot Friedman a couple of weeks ago reported that last he had heard they weren't all that close, and it had been, he used the word challenging negotiation. And then, now you kind of like, you hear Swayman talk, you see Rich Keefe's report of asking for 10 million, which I believe, I know some people don't, but I actually, biased because I work with Keefe, but I actually do think he has sources. And like it all kinds of sheds light on why this is still dragging on, why it's been challenging, why the Bruins aren't just caving and saying, okay, it's gone on long enough, we'll just give you what you want. And it's like, well, no, if what he wants is 10 million or even, something over 9 million, it's like, yeah, of course the Bruins are going to, wait it out and try to get that price down. From Swayman's side, the comments he made on that podcast, it's like, yeah, when he's talking about, he doesn't want to let down future goalies, and he, cares about the market and what it's going to be in the future. It's like, yeah, that's a guy who's going to drive a tough negotiation, along with his agent, who, by the way, has a reputation of driving tough negotiations. Probably most famously with William Nylander in Toronto. So, I still think the second part of your question, am I worried? Not that much, maybe slightly more than I was, 2 weeks ago, but I still think it's going to get done. I think probably before camp, but at least some point during camp before the season starts, just because that's what I've heard, and that's what everyone on both sides has said, and I don't really have any reason to believe that it's not going to eventually get done once they actually sit down and like really focus on this, whenever that is in the next couple of weeks. But it is clear that like there's some real work to do, and it's not just going to be hey, all right, hey, glad you're back. How was your summer? Okay, let's hammer this out in the next half hour. Like it's probably going to be a little bit more complicated than that.
I agree. And to me, like when I look at those quotes, what stands out to me and kind of gives me a little insight into, not just what he's looking for, but what this deal may end up looking like, is I understand the cap is going up and where it will be in years. And, like I'm reading Conor Ryan's story from today, and he mentioned that Alan Walsh, a longtime NHL agent for Octagon, mentioned in an interview with Sportico that the league salary cap could jump from 88 million this upcoming year to around 101 million in the 27-28 season. And, I think people anticipate it going up above that around then too. And I just wonder if that means that Swayman, as a concession, instead of getting the 10 million per year that he's reportedly asking for over the course of a long-term deal, might be looking for a deal that's more in the 4-year range, where, your contract's going to end when the cap is much higher and you can ask for even more. Now that is risky on his part, because you don't know what the next 4 years are going to entail. You don't know how you're going to perform in that. Obviously it's a somewhat of a bet on yourself. And I imagine that payday over those 4 years would still be substantial, somewhere in that $7 to $8 million range, which I think is what he's more worth now, even though, like, what's funny is I've said all offseason, like 8 times 8 makes the most sense. That's just what I think. 8 is still big for what he's given you so far. 8 is still above what he is technically, like, to me, on paper valued as. And I'm not saying he's not a valuable goalie. He is a very valuable goalie. But 8 million is still high for what he is. And my whole thought process on that is that, well, that's going to, he's going to justify that. It might look cheaper down the line in that contract. But again, a short-term deal would allow him to then basically renegotiate a new deal when the cap is bigger and maybe he's better. I don't think that's in the Bruins' best interest either, because, if he's average over those 4 years, well, then I guess that is a good thing for the Bruins. And that, it's not good for them on the ice. It's good for them at the checkbook. But in the other end of it, if he's nasty and is, what he thinks he is, which is a top 3 goalie in the NHL, most likely, that's a big payday down the road too, when you want to be, when you're going to be signing other players or wanting to do different things. So I think this ends up being maybe not like short term, like 2 or 3 years, but sort of that 4-year thing kind of seems like it probably like makes the most sense just for both sides, especially if they're so far apart on the AAV. Let's say Swayman's saying 10 as he's being reported he is, and the Bruins are like, no, like 7.25, 7.5. If Lewis goes is going to continue to be, rigid in that ask, you might have to go for a shorter term deal.
Yeah, it does seem like that's at least on the table now. Whereas, I think the conventional thinking and my thinking throughout most of summer is it's going to be 8 because that's usually what both sides want, right? Like that. There's a reason McAvoy got 8. There's a reason Pasternak got 8. There's a reason most big name free agents, restricted free agents on their own team get that max, because the player wants it, because you just want that long-term security. Like you don't, as you said, like if you're going 4 or 5 years instead, you are betting on yourself to be just as good, if not better, in 4 or 5 years so that you can cash in again. And some guys just don't want to take that risk. Like some guys just want the long-term security of like, God forbid something happens to me injury-wise, or, no one ever thinks their play is going to go down, but like obviously that could happen. So guys want the 8. They want the most money possible while they can get it. And teams want it because the longer the term, the more, it at least somewhat keeps down the cap hit. In theory, doesn't always work out that way. But yeah, it seems like that could be on the table, where if you're so far apart on what the AAV should be on an 8-year deal, yeah, can you get closer on a 4-year deal? And Swayman can feel like, hey, I'm gonna have a chance to cash in again and help set the market again. And and from the Bruins perspective, if you do that, I think if you're the Bruins, then you're maybe looking a little harder at, just have an eye on like, who's going to be our next goalie if we decide we're not going to be the team that pays Swayman in 4 years. Like you kind of start to come up with that plan. Whereas, if you sign for 8 years, you're like, boom, there we go. We're all set. We got our goalie. It's, it's like when you sign Tuukka Rask for 7 years, like that just provides security that the team wants, and usually players want it. But in Swayman's case, we know he's confident in himself, so maybe maybe that is something that he'd be open to.
Maybe it is. I want to continue talking about this, but first, quick word from our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your picks are still live. Big questions going into the football season. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for more or less than 267.5 yards one week? Will Jalen Hurts throw for 240.5 passing yards another? Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Now, back to the show. So what's interesting with the whole Swayman thing is obviously he's reportedly asking for $10 million per season, according to your colleague Rich Keefe. And I think we're a pro get in the bag podcast for players. We want players to get what they're worth. We're all for it. I get, though, from the Bruins' perspective, let's just say I don't think we know yet quite the length Swayman's asking for with $10 million, but I'm going to assume it's 7 or 8 years, that long-term security. If you're the Bruins, are you signing Swayman to an 8x10 contract right now? Absolutely not. Like that is no, you would not do that. And the biggest reason for that is he is still, I don't want to say unproven, but again, like I did this on Poke the Bear yesterday with Connor. 10 games in 2021, which was his first season. 21-22, 41 games. 22-23, 37. 23-24, 44. Now, the reason that I think it's up to 10, reportedly, is because of that playoff run and being as good as he was in those 2 rounds. And no one's disputing that. But that playoff round, to me, put him in that $7-8 million range. He has yet to be a starter for a full season. Handing a guy $80 million guaranteed over the course of 8 years, when you really don't know, what he's going to be. You think he's going to be that. I think we all agree that the pedigree is there, the mental toughness, the ability, all that stuff, the personality. But to hand a $10 million deal that, is, I know Ottinger and Shesterkin are going to be up for new deals soon. Like, they've proven more. To me, 10 to me is he's not worth 10 right now. And I know that obviously you want to ask for as much as you can, but I get the Bruins side of it where it's no, we're not going to give in on $10 million for you.
Yeah, he's unproven in terms of being the highest paid goalie in the league because that's what he would be tied for, right? Like Carey Price hasn't played in 2.5 years, so his $10.5 million, like you can ignore that. That's only because he's not going to retire while he's still collecting money. So you have Sergei Bobrovsky.
Get the bag. Exactly. Get the bag.
Right. Absolutely. Carey Price isn't stupid.
Exactly.
Yes. Sergei Bobrovsky at 10. Okay. Sergei Bobrovsky had 2 Vezinas on his resume when he signed that contract. And now he's won a Stanley Cup and been to the final back-to-back years. So, then you go Andrei Vasilevsky at 9.5. He's won a Vezina in 2 Stanley Cups. He was a Conn Smythe winner. Even drop down further. Connor Hellebuck at 8.5. Just signed that last summer. He won his 2nd Vezina this year. Like, Sorokin maybe a little more unproven, but obviously has been very good. UC Saros just signed this summer for 7.74, which I don't think helped anyone. And I'm sure Swayman and his agent were shaking their heads when they saw that, because Saros is a guy who has played 60 plus games each of the last 3 years and pretty consistently been one of the top 5 goalies. And again, Swayman, as you said, Swayman's career high in games is 44. Like, it's a hard sell to be like, yeah, well, you should just pay Swayman like one of the top goalies because we think he's going to be that. And it's like, okay, but you can't really, like, if you're the Bruins, you can't really be in the business of paying for what you think a guy's going to be when he hasn't yet been that. Like, there is some, past resume that goes into any deal. So, yeah, if I'm the Bruins, I'm waiting it out. I'm definitely not just like caving and giving 10. I think realistically, like Swayman and his agent, I think are going to have to get down to 9 before there's, real conversations. And like, then you can hammer it out from there. And maybe it comes in at 8.5, higher than what we've all thought, which, I'm with you. Like, we've all been saying 8x8. So maybe it comes in a little above that, but to me, as long as they're over 9, like there's not really a serious negotiation. So if you're the Bruins, you kind of just wait for that to come down for them to like actually be ready to talk.
Yeah, 10 is a ton. I mean, again, that would be the 2nd highest paid player on the Bruins, between Pastrnak and McAvoy. Like, again, McAvoy, and I know they're different positions, but you have, Pastrnak and McAvoy are pillars of your franchise, have proven a ton. Swayman looks to be in that category at some point, but is he there yet? No, I don't think he is. I think, projection wise, again, yes, but you don't typically get paid off projections. You have to have some things under your belt. And while Swayman had a nice playoff run this past year, has been good in regular season action, he's been in a tandem for 3 years. Like, 10 is absurd.
I will say, like, in Swayman's defense, if the Bruins throw that at him, he can be like, well, that wasn't my plan. Like, I would have been happy to play more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're the ones who put me in a tandem and didn't give, you're the ones who haven't given me a chance to play 55 games. So, like, I also understand, like, that would be a fair argument, but still, he hasn't actually done it.
Well, also, like, I get his perspective. I'm going to ask for the most possible. I get that end of it. I mean, it'd be funny if like a third pairing defenseman like came out and was like, yeah, I want 10 million a year. That's what I want. They like Mike Riley comes out 3 years ago. They better give me 10 million per season if they want me to run their second power play unit. That's all I'm saying. I want to continue, the Swayman stuff. There's so much to get out of it. And I think, one thing we mentioned earlier was sort of when we think this will happen, when we think it'll get done. I want to talk worst case scenario. I want to get into the worst case. But first, a best case scenario, our friends over at GameTime. Fall is beginning, which means football is back. And nothing beats a college football atmosphere. With both college and NFL games, who doesn't love a good tailgate? Get to the game with GameTime. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This fall, my friends and I are going to the Patriots-Titans game in Tennessee. How will we get tickets for the game? GameTime, of course. The super deal has been amazing to us in the past, and there's no doubt it will be great to us again. I just love the curated deals, which make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Some other features I love are the lowest price guarantee, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. GameTime Picks, curation makes it easier to save more on sports, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, back to the show. So I think you and I are sort of in lockstep with this will be done either right before camp, maybe a little bit into camp. Hard to, I still think it's a long shot to go into the regular season because that's a problem. But in the event it does, there's holdouts. They look at potentially moving him. Do you think any of that is on the table?
No, not right now. Sure, in theory it could get there, but I would be really surprised. Like, I guess where I'm at now is like, I wouldn't be surprised if it drags a little bit into training camp where it's like, hey, maybe he's not on the ice the first couple days. I still would be surprised if it doesn't happen pretty soon after that. And I would definitely be surprised if he's not on the opening night roster. Like that would just require so much stubbornness on both sides where it's like, do you even want to get a deal done? Because ultimately, if you want to get a deal done, you make it happen by then. Like, both sides give enough to make it happen by then. That's how negotiations go. And I think both sides want to get this done. Like, the Bruins traded away Ullmark because they're ready to give the net to Swayman. So they've already tipped their hand. Swayman, every interview he gives, talks about how much he loves being a Bruin, loves being in Boston. He's been around all this summer. He's training with his teammates. Like, he clearly views himself as part of this team long term. So unless that's all just an act, like, which I don't think it is, yeah, like at some point you both have to do something to make it happen, So if it's not done by then that's just like, that's an insane amount of stubbornness. And I really can't see it getting there.
It's funny because you hear more and more people as this, since these quotes have come out, since Rich Keefe's report came out, people going, they should never have traded Linus Ullmark back in June. And, that they need to look at trading Jeremy Swayman. And to me, that seems extreme. Now, if the Swayman negotiations break down to the point where he's moved in October, or, I think that is the worst case scenario. If that's the case, then yeah, obviously you look back and go, why would you deal away Ullmark in that case? But I think we all agree that dealing Ullmark, giving the net to Swayman was always the right move. Swayman is your guy. You drafted him. You've developed him. Clearly, he has the pedigree to be successful in the playoffs. He showed it this past year. And as I think as you said, he has to be willing to give a little, and the Bruins have to be willing to give a little. And that's why I feel like it's going to come to that shorter term deal than 8 years. I mean, 4 years, I don't think is really technically a short-term deal. But it's obviously much shorter than 8. And that's why I think it ends up, just off these comments, it wouldn't shock me if that's what it ends up being. But I don't know. I don't regret. I don't think the Bruins are going to regret dealing Ullmark, because I do think this gets done. And I don't think the Bruins should look to trade Swayman if this, continues to sort of falter. Like, I think this is your guy. I know there's that, common theme of, you don't need a great goaltender to win. But this is not. I mean, I have this team as a cup contender. I think you and I have talked about this. You do too. But take away Swayman and just put Korpisalo in net, and this is not a Stanley Cup contender. Like, I do think a lot of success, not just this year but future years, hinges on Swayman. You're not going to get a goalie close to the caliber of Jeremy Swayman in here anytime soon. And I know people say, "Oh, Bussy, what do you have in Bussy?" Well, that's you can see what you have in Brandon Bussy, and I think we all think that he's going to be, pretty good. But to Swayman's level, Korpisalo to Swayman's level, like, you're not going to go out and find a guy like Swayman. You got lucky. You drafted him in the 4th round. Like, you take advantage of that. I don't think you deal Swayman at any point.
No. Yeah, and by the way, Brandon Bussy is older than Jeremy Swayman. So
yes,
most goalies who are going to get to Swayman's level do it at a younger age. So, like,
yes,
I think the ceiling on Brandon Bussy is pretty limited, even though I do think he's pretty solid. Yeah, the other thing with the Ullmark trade is there was a timetable on when you had to do that. Like,
yep.
After the Devils got Jacob Markstrom, the Ottawa Senators were really like the only real aggressive goalie buyer left. It's not to say that someone else wouldn't have popped up at some point, but like, if you weren't going to trade Ullmark, the Senators would have looked elsewhere. They would have done something, because like, they're not waiting. They're not going to be like, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll circle back in our, in September during training camp." Like, no, they're building their team. So like,
they're like, "Oh, those Swayman negotiations are going to fall apart. We'll take Swayman in 3 months."
Yeah. So if you don't trade him to Ottawa, then A, you're not getting that draft pick, the 1st round pick, and B, you might not be trading Ullmark at all. Like, that might be the end of his market, and then you're just keeping him through the end of his contract, or revisiting it in season when you're probably not going to get as much. So no, they should not regret trading Ullmark, because they're, listen, I didn't love the return. I didn't like taking on Korpisalo at $3 million. But they got a 1st round pick, which I think is still pretty good, all things considered. And that wasn't going to happen if you just waited and said, well, we'll try to trade him during training camp once we get Swayman done. Like, it's not really an option. Big trades like that don't happen now.
No, they don't. And that's why I think, and Ullmark's a perfect example. Could someone take Swayman at the current moment, a good young goalie who they get to sort of negotiate a contract with? Probably. But Ullmark at this time, no, I don't. I don't think that would have been something that would fly right now. I'm fascinated to see how this sort of plays out. Because again, if he signs in a week or two, it's like, all right, well, what was this all for? You know, like this panic level that sort of rose after these comments. But again, I think, I'm with you on this. I think this gets done either right before camp or at the very beginning. Am I panicking? No. Raises the panic a teeny bit though. I said this to Connor yesterday. Little sweat comes down the forehead, just a little bit, making you sweat out a little. But I don't like, I heard Felger yesterday just being like, trade him, get rid of him. And it's like, no, not yet. No, you don't do that. Not with someone that, we say all the time in any sport, you have a prospect, you developed him, he pans out. You don't just go trading him away. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Swayman's just going to have to come down off the $10 million perch. Scott, always a pleasure. What can the people look forward to from you over at WEEI and the Skate Podcast?
We got regular episodes of the Skate Pod going. We just dropped a mailbag this week, an episode of DJ Bean. We'll have coverage of captain's practices and all that next week. WEI.com, there'll be coverage there. And you can see my little Twitter handle up here. So that's about it.
That's all that matters. Scott, always a fun time. And that's been this week's Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.